Sideways Stories from Wayside School by Louis Sakar. If you have enjoyed these stories over the past several weeks, make sure you check out this book from the library. There are actually a lot more stories in here that I did not get around to reading, but they are all really, really silly, and I hope you guys have enjoyed them. Today, we are going to be reading the last 3 stories in this book. So, let's get going. The first story we're going to read is about a guy named Nancy. Nancy had big hands and big feet. He didn't like his name. He thought it was a girl's name. None of the other girls in Mrs. Lewis's class thought that Nancy's name was odd. They didn't think of it as a girl's name or a boy's name. Nancy was just the name of the quiet kid with the big hands and feet who sat over there in the corner next to John. Nancy was very quiet and shy. He was ashamed of his name. He had only one friend, a girl who went to class on the 23rd story of the Wayside School. They were friends for a good reason. They didn't know her name. He didn't know her name, and she didn't know his. They just called each other, "Hey you," or just plain "you." Nancy was afraid to ask his friend what her name was, because then he might have to tell her his name. He never could figure out why she never asked, but he was happy just to leave well enough alone. One morning, Nancy and his friend were late. When they got to the 23rd story, his friend's teacher was waiting outside. "Hurry up, you're late, Mac," said the teacher. Nancy's friends turned red. She didn't move. "Come on, Mac, shake a leg, get the lead out," said the teacher said. "Your name is Mac?" said Nancy. Mac was very pretty. She had red hair and freckles. She covered her face and ran to the room. "My name is Nancy," Nancy called after her. Mac stepped back outside. "I was ashamed to tell you my name," she said. "Me too," said Nancy. "Nancy's a girl name." "Oh, I think it's cute," said Mac. "I like the name Mac," said Nancy. "Mac is a boy's name," said Mac. "My mother has a rich aunt named Nancy," said Nancy. "That's why she gave me the name." "Well, my mother once had a dog named Mac," said Mac. "Hey, do you want to trade?" Nancy asked. "Can we?" asked Mac. "I don't see why not," said Nancy. "Okay." So they both spun around 100 times in opposite directions until they were so dizzy that they fell over. When they stood up, Mac was Nancy and Nancy was Mac. They said goodbye. Then Mac raced up to Mrs. Jewls' room. He was no longer shy. "Hi, everybody. My name's Mac," he announced. "I traded names." He held out his big hand. Todd jumped up and shook it. "Hi, Mac," he said. "Glad to meet you." "How you doing, Mac?" said Ron. "Howdy, Mac," said Terrence. "Nice to meet you, Mac," said Bibi. "You traded names?" asked Jason. Jason didn't like his name either. "That's right, Jason, old boy," said Mac. "Is that allowed?" asked Jason. "Why not?" said Mac. "Hey, anybody want to trade?" Jason called. "I'll trade with you," said Terrence. He didn't like his name either. "Wait, I'll trade with you, Terrence," said Marcia. Marcia didn't like her name. "No, he's trading with me," said Jason. "I'll trade with you, Marcia," said Damien. "No thanks," said Marcia. "I'll trade with you, Damien," said Mrs. Jewls. "No, I don't want to be Mrs. Jewls," said Stephen. It turned out that nobody in Mrs. Jewls' class liked his name. The children all spun around in different directions until they got so dizzy that they fell over. And when they stood up again, nobody knew who anybody was. "What are we going to do, Mrs. Jewls?" asked Leslie, who was really Eric Bacon. "My name isn't Mrs. Jewls, it's Marcia," answered Terrence, who was really Jason. "It is not. I'm Marcia," said Dee Dee, who was really Joe. "You're both wrong," said Marcia. "I'm Mrs. Jewls." This went on for an hour. At last they figured out who the real Rondi was. She was missing her 2 front teeth. After they figured out Rondi, they were able to get Allison pretty easily. And then from there, they got DJ, Damien, and Mrs. Jewls. She was the oldest one. Eventually, they figured out who everybody really was. They had some difficulty deciding which Eric was which, and actually they are still not absolutely sure. Everybody just decided to keep his own name. The children didn't like them, but it made things easier. Mac and Nancy kept their new names, but when they were together, they still called each other "Hey you" or just plain "you." And the next story is about Stephen. Stephen had green hair. He had purple ears and a blue face. He wore his sister's pink dancing shoes and green leotards. The leotards matched his green hair. He was all dressed up as a goblin for Mrs. Jewls' Halloween party. But unfortunately, It wasn't Halloween. Ha ha ha! You sure look stupid, said Jason. Jason was Stephen's best friend. So do you, said Stephen. Boy, are you dumb, said Jenny. Halloween is on Sunday. Today is only Friday. You're the one who's dumb, said Stephen. Ha ha! You'd probably come to school on Sunday. Mrs. Jewell said we'd have the party today. But none of the other children wore costumes, only Stephen. All right, class, said Mrs. Jewell. It's time for a Halloween party. See, said Stephen. Mrs. Jewell gave each child a cookie and looked like an orange witch with a black hat. She laughed when she saw Stephen and forgot to give him one. Stephen didn't ask for it. He was afraid that she'd laugh again. The children finished their cookies in less than 30 seconds. All right, class, the party is over. We have work to do. Stephen felt like a fool. The party lasted less than a minute, and he had to spend the rest of the day wearing his stupid goblin suit. Look, Stephen's wearing his sister's leotards, laughed Dana. They're green, just like his hair, said Fatso. Everybody laughed. Mrs. Jewell began the arithmetic lesson. She wrote on the blackboard, 2 + 2 = 5. That's wrong, Joy shouted. Mrs. Jewell tried again. 2 + 2 = 3. That wasn't right either. She added 2 and 2 again and got 43. It was useless. No matter how hard she tried, she could not get 2 + 2 = 4. I don't understand it, she said. They've always equaled 4 before. Suddenly, she screamed. The chalk turned into a squiggling worm. She dropped it on her foot. Then all the lights went out and the blackboard lit up like a movie screen. A woman appeared on the screen. She had a long tongue and pointed ears, and she stepped out of the screen and into the classroom. It was the ghost of Mrs. Gorf. Mrs. Gorf ran her fingernails across the blackboard. Trick or treat, my rotten kids, she said. Now I'll get you, even with every last one of you. Where's Todd? Who is that? Asked Mrs. Jewell. Mrs. Gorf, said Damien. Who's Mrs. Gorf? Asked Mrs. Jewell. She was the meanest teacher we ever had, said Monty. What happened to her? Asked Mrs. Jewell. Louis ate her, said Jason. Well, I'm not going to allow this, said Mrs. Jewell. Get out of my classroom, she demanded. It's Halloween, sweet teacher, said Mrs. Gorf. Ghosts can go anywhere they like, and I've come for a little class reunion. But it isn't Halloween, said Mrs. Jewell. Halloween is still 2 days away. I know, said Mrs. Gorf, but Halloween falls on a Sunday this year, so we are celebrating it on the Friday before. Stephen leaped up from his seat. See, I was right, he said. Today is the day we celebrated the Friday before. Mrs. Gorf proved it. He ran up to Mrs. Gorf. They all laughed at me and made me feel stupid because I was the only one dressed up. But they were the ones who were wrong. You and I are right. And he put his arms around Mrs. Gorf and hugged her. Mrs. Gorf gasped and disappeared. The lights came back on, and Mrs. Jewell picked up the piece of chalk from the floor. She wrote on the blackboard, 2 + 2 = 4. That's good, she said. When 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4, anything can happen. And all the children who had laughed at Stephen now called him a hero, but they told him to change out of his stupid costume. So at lunch, Stephen went home, washed up, and changed. He came back wearing blue jeans and a polo shirt. Of course, his hair was still green. It always was. Alright, so the last story is about Louis, the guy who wrote the book, Louis Cigar. Louis had a red face and a mustache of many colors. He was the yard teacher at Wayside School. It was his job to see that the children didn't have too much fun during lunch and recess. And if you haven't already guessed it, he is the one who wrote this book. On June 10th, there was a blizzard. Louis was afraid that the children would have too much fun, so nobody was allowed outside. Class, said Mrs. Jewell, after you finish your lunch, come back up to the classroom. You are not allowed outside. The children all went to the lunchroom. Mrs. Mush had made tuna surprise. They looked at it, then hurried back up the stairs. There was nothing to do. Now, class, said Mrs. Jewell, I know that you are all bored, but I have a special surprise for you. I hope it's better than tuna surprise, said Marcia. Mrs. Jewell continued. Louis is going to come up and entertain us. He will tell us a story. Now I want you all to be on your best behavior. When Louis walked in, all the children booed. "Are you going to tell us a story?" asked Phoebe. "Yes," said Louis. "Well, it better be good," Phoebe warned. "It better be better than tuna surprise," said Butterfingers. "I thought the tuna surprise was good," said Louis. "You'd eat dirt if they put ketchup on it," said Mac. "Hey, everybody, be quiet. Let him tell the story." "Not too loud, Louis," said Sherry. "I'm trying to get some sleep." Louis sat in the middle of the room, and all the children gathered around. Louis began his story. "This is a story about a school very much like this one. But before we get started, there is something you ought to know, so that you don't get confused. In this school, every classroom is on the same story." "Which one is the 18th?" asked Jenny. "No," said Louis. "They are all on the ground. The school is only one story high." "Not much of a school," laughed Damien. Louis continued. "Now you might think the children there are strange and silly. That is probably true. However, when I tell them stories about you, they thought you were strange and silly." "Us?" the children answered. "How are we strange?" "I'm normal," said Stephen. "Aren't I?" "As normal as I am," Joe assured him. "The children at that school must be crazy," said Leslie. "Real Lulus," Marcia agreed. "Tell us about them, Louis," Phoebe demanded. "Well, for one thing," Louis said, "none of these children have ever been turned into an apple." "That's silly," said Dee Dee. "Everybody's been turned into an apple. It's part of growing up." Louis continued. "Dead rats don't walk into the classroom wearing raincoats." "Well, what do they wear, tuxedos?" asked Todd. "And girls never try to sell their toes," Louis added. "Well, no wonder," said Leslie, "at today's prices." Louis continued. "They don't trade names or read upside down. They can't turn mosquito bites into numbers. They don't count the hairs on their head. The walls don't laugh, and 2 + 2 always equals 4. "How horrible," said Damien. "That's not the worst of it," said Louis. "They have never tasted a Marcia-flavored ice cream." A hush fell over the classroom. "Mrs. Jules, I'm scared," said Allison. "Is there really a school like that?" "Of course not," said Mrs. Jules. "Louis was just telling a story." "It was a good story," said Leslie. "I thought it was stupid," said Kathy. "I liked it," said Monty. "It was funny." Mrs. Jules said, "Louis, it was a very entertaining story, but we don't really go in for fairy tales here. I'm trying to teach my class the truth." "That's all right," said Louis. "I have to go down to room 29 now and tell them a story." He started out the door. "Class," said Mrs. Jules, "let's all thank Louis for his wonderful story." Everyone booed. All right, I hope you guys have enjoyed Sideways Stories from Wayside School. Once again, if you're interested in more of these fun stories, make sure you check this book out from the library. Bye, guys.